So we previously shared about these three big hurdles that can be a big part of preventing us from making disciples. And today I want to give a few thoughts on really addressing this first idea of simply meeting people. It's how to engage with unbelievers, how to start this opportunity to see them engage with Jesus and encountering him for life change. So speaking of Jesus, he's really the best example of meeting people. You know, when we see the ease, the natural, but also very effective and fruitful ways that he engages with people, like the woman at the well in John 4. We see at the end of this encounter, her life is just profoundly impacted by him, by truth, by hope, by this opportunity to deal with her own brokenness. And it all begins because he's able to effectively engage with her. Now, that's not the only example. In fact, Scripture's full of examples of Jesus and his followers meeting folks, engaging with them, starting some kind of dialogue and relationship. And so we want some tools that I think can be helpful in guiding you in just working on this. It's not a formula. It's also not a science. It takes some art. It takes some listening to the Lord, some working on it. So as you practice these, keep practicing these tools I'm about to give you, and I think they'll bear fruit over time. So the first one is absolutely essential, and it's simply to pray. Like, prayer is the absolute central heart of finding and engaging successfully with the people that God has for you. So I would just encourage you to have a prayer discipline, especially if this is something that you know you want to respond to. And let me just say that if you are leading a group, if you're starting a new ministry, if you are responding to the call to be sent by Jesus into the harvest, this is absolutely crucial for you to be fruitful in with time. It's a huge part of growing any ministry and producing fruit, is being able to make disciples. And that starts with this prayer. So be prayerful in asking God to send people your way, to open the eyes of your heart, to be aware of them, to see them when you do encounter them. Pray for God. And my own experience is that when you begin to pray this, God answers. God does not leave this prayer unanswered. He will bring people into your life for you to engage with. So start this habit of prayer. Just say, God, help me be aware of the people that you want me to encounter. Okay, the second tool I want to talk about is simply paying attention. And you might think this is a funny one to mention, but I find that it's really a good way of describing kind of a mindset that tends to open up a lot of relationships, a lot of conversations. For me, I have a couple of conversation starters that are based on what I'm observing. Sometimes I simply like to make a comment about someone's tattoo. For instance, at the Lion and Starbucks a couple of weeks ago, the barista handed me my coffee. I'm in the drive-thru, and as he handed the coffee, I noticed he had a tattoo of a moth on his arm. And so I noticed, I said, hey, that's an interesting tattoo. Tell me about it. And for some reason, people just love to talk about their tattoos. And this guy just got sharing why he had it. Then he asked me if I had any. I said I didn't. I told him why. It opened up the spiritual conversation. All of that was a product of just noticing, observing something that was true about him. You can ask about, you can observe all kinds of things about people. Maybe it's the bike they're riding or the kind of car they're driving. Maybe it's you would commend something about their children or their pet. Like, people love to talk about this kind of thing. And there can also be paying attention to the things that aren't quite right in someone's life. Maybe you notice that someone just is having a rough day, and you ask about it, or you notice that they've been dragging, and you ask if they've been getting enough rest or whatever it may be. But as you pay attention to what they're going through, it can open up great opportunities. A second tool I'd like to suggest is putting yourself in high contact situations. What I mean by this is seek out situations where you can naturally and pretty non-awkwardly engage with people. So what does that look like? It could be as simple as walking a dog around the block. If you don't have a dog and you're trying to become more fruitful in evangelism, get one. This is such a great opportunity. People are drawn like a magnet to pets, especially in our culture. And if you have a dog and you just walk around the block, I guarantee that there will be conversations that will start, especially get a cute dog and, walk in the cool of the evening, or find a bike path where you can just be out and you're likely to engage with people. Depending on the context of where you are in life, if you have kids, take them to the park. You will find other kids at the park or the playground, and there'll be other parents. Likely, you might sit on this park bench and talk to the parent on the park bench next to you, and you can just engage very naturally. So this high contact situation is a really good opportunity for beginning to meet people. The next one I want to mention is really kind of foundational and fundamental, and it's just making intentional choices. What I mean by this is, sometimes we unconsciously make these choices that kind of isolate us from others and lower the possibility or the chances of engaging with people to begin with. We live in the kind of world where you drive your car into your garage and you lower the garage door behind you, and sometimes you never even engage with your neighbors, let alone the vast numbers of people that you may share a city with. And so what we want to do is make intentional choices to increase the probability of being able to meet people and engage with them. And maybe that's as simple as like taking out your earbuds at the gym. Like, I know from experience that sometimes you just want to be in the zone and kind of doing your own thing, but whether it's being on a walk or at the gym working out, like, take out your earbuds and be aware and be available for conversation. Maybe if the same thing goes for being on the plane. If you grab your book or your Kindle and you're just in the zone, instead of focusing on people, you may be missing an opportunity. So if you're praying to meet people, make choices that set yourself up for that. Another idea here is intentionally patronize the same places. Like, go to the same gas station, and instead of swiping your credit card, go inside and talk with the clerk, learn their name, go back at the same time on purpose, the same shift, so that you can just have the opportunity to get to know them in a little kind of way. You may also want to take notes in a non-creepy kind of way, right? Like just take notes. If you're like me, sometimes I forget details, and whether it's the cashier's name or something that they're going through, if they open up and they tell you, hey, my son, I'm really struggling because my son's going through this and I was up late with them, and like, write that down. And when you go back and you see them again, say, hey, Joan, you may not remember me, but we talked last time. How's your son doing? Just at Chick-fil-A recently, we asked our server like how she was doing. She had a rough day. She said this accident had happened to her son. When we went back and asked her how her son was doing, it absolutely opened the door up for conversation. So when you make these kinds of choices, you take notes, you follow up, it can be a really, really powerful thing. 2 final tips I want to share. So this other one is to serve. And this is almost a whole strategy in and of itself. In fact, some literature would suggest this is the main and most effective strategy for meeting people and positioning yourself for influence, spiritual influence in their lives in 21st century America. When I say serve, don't just think soup kitchen, although it also includes that, but think of any way where you can provide, meet a need for people around you. And it may be as simple as offering a ride to your neighbor who needs to get to work. It may be providing a safe place in your backyard for other neighborhood kids to play with your own. It may be that your living room becomes a hub as your teens have other teens come over and hang out there. And that home, that living room, can be a way to serve them. It may be giving of your time or energy, becoming a safe person that people can talk to, whether it's classmates or coworkers. If they can talk to you and share what's going on in their lives, that's a way to serve them. And as you serve, you earn, I think, really the opportunity to share with them. Now, don't get obsessed with earning the opportunity to be heard or the right to be heard, because really our right to share doesn't come from anything we've earned. It comes from Jesus, and he's the one who's earned the right to make a difference and to be shared with them in their life. But this can really position you, nonetheless, for the rest of the process of being able to make disciples as you serve people. And I'm going to mention another one that's really helpful too. It's just investing in unchurched. I'm just going to write unchurched, but unchurched situations. So what does that look like? Could be if you have a hobby, or if there's a club that you get involved in, if maybe it's coaching or volunteering. Like, I cannot even begin to express the kinds of doors that volunteering as a little league coach might open. If you are struggling to meet people, find a place, an unchurched, primarily unchurched kind of context where you can get involved, you can serve, or you can invest. And for me, there was a time when I was trying to figure out how can I just like be around people who need Jesus, and the answer was joining a rock climbing gym in my last city I lived in. And so for me, that was a great place because all these millennial young adults would hang around and they would do a route, and then they would spend like 10 minutes just sitting there and talking and resting. And so no one had screens out. There wasn't a big time rush or crunch, and it was super natural to sit on a mat and to talk to people and engage about rock climbing and also about life. So find a place, an interest, a club, a way that you can volunteer or engage, something that you like to do, but intentionally focused on the unchurched. And the last one I want to talk about is simply how can you approach people. So sometimes it can be really helpful to have tools where you can be confident and also effective in simply approaching people. I'm going to say kind of cold, right? Now, we've all seen examples of this done poorly, and it's certainly possible to knock on doors or just walk up to people and turn them off from Jesus. We don't want to do that. We want to be winsome, we want to be fruitful, we want to be effective. And I do think that there are ways to sort of have a cold approach to people and have it be effective, right? So let me just give some examples. Whether it's targeting people around where you live or around your church. I know Al Sones in our conference recently mentioned in their teams, they sometimes will go to a farmer's market or a public place like a park or maybe even the mall, the food court, or people standing at kiosks. And you can simply go up to folks. If you have an effective, helpful opening line, that's really a key. And you want a line that dispels suspicion, that kind of normalizes why you're there and reassures people all at the same time while providing kind of an entry point for the conversation. So I'm going to give some examples of that. In my own experience, this has been a helpful thing. It's been fruitful. There was a time when I really felt like we needed to know the people around where our church was. And so we just went and we looked for people that were out in their yards. We did a kind of canvassed the neighborhood in a prayer walk. And as we went, we were praying and asking God to lead us to people that we could have conversations with. And so sometimes they're on their front porch or on their steps or in the lawn and in the yard, and we would just talk. Sometimes we would knock on doors, and again, the opening line is key. So we'd say something like this: hey, we're just in the neighborhood today, getting to know our community, and wondering if we could pray for you or your family in any specific ways today. It's non-threatening, it's specific. It helps them know you're not selling something, and there's no strings attached, right? You're just offering prayer. I will say that not everyone is receptive to that, and occasionally you'll just have a flat no, or I'm sorry, but we're good, or whatever. But many times there'll be an openness to receive prayer. And here's the powerful thing. The first visit is rarely super productive, but often if you go back and you say, hey, we were here last week, prayed for your Aunt Joe's knee, how's it doing? Like, it's powerful when people realize, wow, they weren't just playing, like they're actually praying for what they said they would pray for, and they care about it. That can open some powerful doors. So there's so many ways that you can engage people. These are just a few tools, but I hope whatever tools you're using, that you give some thought to these, that you just pray about what that next step might be for you. And the ultimate goal, our hope and prayer, is that you'd be able to meet people and start out the process well of making disciples.